set.
Not sure if you guys heard my music blasting or not. No? Okay, good. I had my volume on mute. And then when I turned it up, I was like, oh, my music is on. All right, we have a packed agenda, so let's get started. Here's the agenda in the chat. The first thing up is Matt Carrano with page layout and navigation patterns. And you are on mute, Matt, so just make sure to...
All right, here I am. Okay, so what I have been working on over the past couple of weeks is we've been going through a process of trying to determine what are the navigation patterns and page layouts that we need for PatternFly next. Our ultimate goal is that we will have some number of page templates with different types of navigation that someone can choose as a framework for building out their application. So the process for doing that, we've collected screenshots from a large number of products that are using PatternFly today. I've gone through a process of analyzing those screenshots, trying to group them, trying to categorize them based on the navigation and information architecture that those products are using, and have created at a wireframe level a number of potential layouts that I will share with you. So let me share my screen out. So these are at a very rough level. So the intent here is I'm working with the visual design team to who will be working on creating high fidelity mockups around these layouts, but really kind of starting from the simplest to the most complex with think of situations where we have only a few, anywhere from 2 to 5 primary navigation items and primary navigation only, where that can be organized around a simple single level navigation, horizontal navigation. We can also then introduce a vertical for secondary and tertiary. So here we have a combined sort of hybrid approach with a horizontal primary and vertical secondary menu. And going further into approaches with vertical only, with here we see 2 levels represented on a vertical menu, and then further local navigation using horizontal tabs in this content area. Again, we're sort of, this is work in progress where I'm working closely with the CSS team and the visual team to continue to evolve and flesh out this work. Any questions? Okay, if not, I will hand this back over to you, Leslie.
All right, thanks, Matt. The next thing we have up is a number of visual design mockups that have been created. Kyle, do you want to cover this?
Yes. So I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, and while you're sharing, I'm going to put a link to our survey in the chat. So you can feel free to provide feedback along the way during this demo, or I will send out the link in a follow-up email as well, so you can provide feedback afterwards as well.
All right, great. Do you see my screen, Leslie? We're good to go.
Yep.
This is the inline notifications. So I've showed these before, but we made some adjustments to the text colors, added a little bit more contrast. So there's a lot of, it's tough to see through blue jeans, but there's a lot of distance between, there's a higher ratio between the icon, the darkness of the icon and the lightness of the background, and then enough between the background to the white. So we used our shadow system as well as our new buttons that we'd created. So pretty simple for the inline, maintaining that same styling and then pushing it to the toast notifications, which is different than our current method where they look completely different. But now we're trying to be a little bit more modular and make them look similar. Even if they're technically different, visually they'll look the same. And then we can just expand this down, and the X and the check mark will stay at the top. Matt's going to talk a little bit about the functionality of this. And then this would be the the notification drawer, where you're going to see a little bit different visualization, because you're going to see a lot of these notifications. We don't need as heavy of color for that, and it would be really overwhelming, especially if application couldn't discern between whether it's a successful or a warning message. So they'd be just potentially all blue or all of one color. We don't really need all that color. So we reduced it down to use the 3-pixel border size that we have been using. And we have a option to have them aggregated in the top. And then you click this object, and then or this line here, row, and it will expand all that down so you can see the individual notifications, or you can just show all the individual notifications. So just a few visual options there. And then you can see what it looks like on the actual application itself. So that's it, pretty simple. And it does take up the whole height of the screen there, because we were making it take up like almost the whole height of the screen, but in reality, if you have that window open, you're going to want to focus on that, and then you can close it again. So that's alerts, post notifications, and notification drawer. And then, and then I believe we're looking at colors. So this is so we needed to update the accent color. We were just slightly off from AA with the old PatternFly Blue 400. So we darkened it just slightly. This is as very light as you can go with a blue and still have AA contrast ratio, no matter what size or what size your text is. So before, our text needed to be large, but now we don't have to rely on the size. This works either way, on white or on black. So we are using 007 BBA. So basically what we're going to do is just make an adjustment to the 400, and then 500 and 300 will stay the same. And the same for text links. And it does work over, as I said, white or black. You can see here in the buttons specifically how that would apply. So we could have, if we add buttons that are using a primary or secondary over black, because we do have areas where we have actions over a dark color, we now have a treatment for that, and that is compliant. So there's that. And then we have, as you just saw, we do have badges. So we created this simple badge design, fits in this pill shape, consistent with the rest of our pill shapes that we're using, and then uses the new PatternFly 400. Can appear to the right of anywhere, in a simple list. It can appear to the right, or you could really utilize it wherever you'd like. And then here is the list view, the simple list. So you can see here, it's just so we have something called a list view. Well, we're separating that from this actual pattern here. This is a simple list view, which is nothing more than just an ordered or unordered list. And so we're trying to figure out how the typography works, and so we can get the hierarchy correct. So very simple. And then we worked on the spacing, identifying how the spacing would work with individual objects, how those would line up, getting the line height correct. So that way we would make sure that we're mirroring how the development's going to work. So the mockups and the actual coded element will match. And I believe that is it. That's it for me. Oh, actually, no, we have a modal. So here is a simple modal design. So you can see here we are blurring the background. That is the one thing that's different than our current modal, but it allows the user to focus on the actual modal itself. Again, trying to get the type hierarchy correct. We were figuring out how this modal would break down. So Sarah did a ton of great work on the box and figuring out how all these individual these rows would work in this box shape, figuring out what content goes there and what it looks like. So you can see the results of that here. Pretty standard modal, and then figuring out how it would expand to accommodate things like a form, how it would grow, and also how we could have content on the left and on the right. Just trying to make it really free for anybody to want to treat it however they'd like. And that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions about this? No? All right. Thanks, Leslie.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So next we have a number of CSS implementations that have been done, which include Jenn, Andrés, Matt, Carleton, and Sarah. So the first one on top is Jenn, and I'll let you guys just go through it.
Hey, so I included the dropdown component for PatternFly Next. This is the dropdown page. So under components, dropdown, the examples I included are the dropdown expanded, the dropdown when it's collapsed, plus the hover effect over that. The dropdown when you're using a kebab. We currently don't have icons included yet in PatternFly Next, so I'm just using this text as a placeholder for where the kebab would go. An example of the kebab if it were right aligned, so showing that the menu is right aligned with the kebab icon. Also, just the regular drop-down button menu that's right aligned with the menu. And then an example of the menu if it drops up. And then the documentation for it is down below. And that's it. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Okay, Andrés, looks like you're next up.
Yeah, so I have two things to share. The first one is about modifier classes. We had a discussion on having consistency on the prefixes for modifier classes. So instead of having is or has, at the moment we are going to just prefix it with an M. So it's going to be pf-m-primary, for example, or m-expanded. We still need to do that change, but it's going to happen. The other thing is we remove support for IE11. So we went back to CSS variables instead of SAS variables, and we remove all the fallbacks for grid.
Okay. Matt?
All right. So like Kyle said, I basically was just working on all the things that he had just shown that they had designed. So we now have notifications, so both toast and inline. You'll notice we don't have icons for these yet because we're still working on getting that finished up. But we have all the variations for these. I also did the title component. So we have our 6 titles, different sizes, font weights, and line height. And then, what else did I do? The color updates, what Kyle had said, the primary color, we had changed that, so we updated that. And then, if anybody had noticed, we did change from 7 headings or titles to 6, so I made that update as well. And that is it. Any questions?
All right, Sarah, you're up.
All right. This was a couple weeks ago. I did the buttons. So there are variations for primary, secondary, tertiary, and danger. There's also the alternative that basically on dark, and I think I just saw there's going to be a primary alternative in Kyle's mockup. And then these are all the button states with the hover, the active, and focus. And same for the secondary ones. There's a block level button, and then here are all the modifiers down below. So that's it for buttons. And then the other thing that Kyle mentioned also that I had done the precursor for, or a box. So box we determined had 3 parts, header, body, and footer. And the header and footer are optional. So in all the examples here, I'm showing the correct spacing is maintained if you don't have the header or the footer, or if you don't have either one. And there's basically no modifiers at this point on box, just the parts. That's it.
I had a question on the buttons. Did you consider having like a link style button where it takes up the same space so that it looks similar to if you had a list of 5 buttons, but like the last one could be like a super tertiary and just like a blue link?
I think that's coming in the next group of work that's being done, right? The skeleton button.
I think we called it a ghost button.
Or ghost button, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I like
those
that.
Halloween things.
But I think this is asking for something slightly different. This is asking for like a link style action.
Yeah, like if you wanted to have like a common pattern that I like to use is like a primary button, and like something that's super, super tertiary, like a cancel, could just be like a link style button. Or you've got something that maybe is floated way to the right and super, super tertiary, like click on this thing, but you want the padding and spacing and everything to line up.
Right.
And maybe have a hover that looks like a button too.
Another question, do you guys consider a button with a smaller class? Like maybe in some cases on the UI, probably the designer would like to have a button that is in a smaller size. Like
we did talk about having a button that was a smaller size, but one of the biggest problems with the PatternFly 3 was everybody talked about how the buttons were too small, and so they were actually 14. So these buttons render at 16. It is possible, and maybe we do something like a ghost button for that scenario where it does render at a smaller space, but we can still maintain the actual size of the type to make sure we have enough scale.
Right. Nothing else?
So I think maybe we can, I guess the buttons PR has been merged, right? Or the issue's closed, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I guess for the link thing, we can take a look at where we want to address that. I can follow up on that. And then the other thing that I was thinking might be helpful is in the PatternFly Next demo, if we provided in the agenda, if we provided links so that like people can follow those out to be able to make comments if they want to, or even I guess follow the demo. Okay, next up we have Dana with the release and workspace improvements.
Okay, let's see. Let me show my screen. We can go quick through this because this isn't nearly as exciting as all of the nice demo stuff that we saw. So we've added Symantec release support to PatternFly Next, which means that we can have more releases more often. So you'll see, we have to drop the -alpha name in order to be able to release that way, but in order to release quickly and get these out there, that seems to be a good alternative. So for now, it's going to require that we'll probably do it about once a week, and then as soon as it gets a little more stable, we'll do it with every commit and just flip that switch. So that's happening. And then if people want more releases, just in the Slack channel, just talk to, you know, we can start talking about it and do this as often as people need them. So that's one thing that was added. The other thing, if we, on the PF Next site, just want to show something. Sarah and I worked on contribution guidelines with some examples, talking about how we're using handlebars when creating examples. So this was up available at the top under contribution, and you can just see the decisions around the naming of files and things like that. But to help with this along those lines, just wanted to show if people aren't aware that we do in PatternFly Next, we're using generators to help create this. So this might be a little small to see, but there's a PF generate command that's available in the repo. So for components or demos or layouts, if you want to create a new one, you just generate it, and then it creates in the folder. You can see it created a brand new one with the right structure and some example names for people to use. So we're continuing to modify the generator so that it has all of the core pieces for creating something new, and hopefully help with not needing as much in the README for getting started, but just have a good generated scaffolded out component or demo when people want to contribute to PatternFly. But then we're also documenting those names in the READMEs as well. And the only other thing that I mentioned we did in the workspace is we also added the ability within the let me find a good one, within the examples to pop them out. This one does not look like the new alert style. Sorry, Matt. But you'll see a new icon at the far right here. So if you want to see what it would look like all by itself, like these layouts are good for that. Let's do a good one here. Where you say, well, I want to see what it's going to look like on a full screen. You can pop it into another window, and it shows it by itself. So that way, you get the media queries and things like that for really getting a picture of what the whole thing would look like. And as we move past or to larger components, this is going to become more useful. So I think that's about it for changes and improvements in our workspace. Back to you, Leslie.
All right. And the last thing on our agenda is Jenn talking about accessibility with the vertical nav.
So I'm sure this is old news for a lot of you, but there's a school in Raleigh, Governor Moorhead School. They serve students who are blind or with low vision. And a few of us had been meeting with them the first few months of this year. We reviewed test pages with them and observed them using them, these test components, and getting their feedback. And all of the test pages that we reviewed with them are in these slides. This first slide, other test pages. So like week 3, week 4, week 5. We started off reviewing the kebab initially, and then we moved into reviewing navigation. And so these slides are just a write-up of the navigation review that we did. It does include some of the feedback we got about menus. The navigation test page was based on the PatternFly 3 vertical nav with secondary menu, so you can see how I can expand the science menu item to get a submenu with secondary menu items. So these slides just go through the test page we reviewed, some of the questions that we had that we were trying to understand that are affected by accessibility, how we can implement those interaction behaviors in a way that are accessible for users who are using screen readers. It includes feedback that we received from the test participants, both when we were reviewing the drop-down menus and then also when reviewing the navigation. And then based on the feedback we got from them and also our observations and watching them use these test pages, we put together some recommendations for how you should interact with the vertical navigation, as well as recommendations for the HTML, what kind of structure we should have. Things like using UL elements for structuring the list, including headings. The link, I think, was kind of one of the more interesting things that conclusions we came to with this, because it is navigation. We wanted the parent menu items, for example, science. This isn't a link itself, but we want it to be accessible to users who are using screen readers. and defining it as a link was, we thought, the best way to make it accessible to those users if they're looking for all the links on a page or navigating by link. Otherwise, for this type of interaction, like with the drop-down menu that we show, our recommendation would be to continue using a button to show and hide a menu, which is more true to what a button is for, which is performing an action. But if you have any questions about the write-up, include it in these slides, definitely reach out and let me know. And that was just a brief summary. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jen. So that covers everything that we wanted to demo. I guess I just wanted to stop and see if anyone had any topics that they wanted to discuss or any questions late coming on any of these items. And, oh, Rob, I can't hear you. Are you talking?
I'm talking to Kevin's.
Oh, no worries.
Is there any update on timeline?
So we are looking to release our, it would be our third alpha next week. And so with this alpha, it includes components. I'm sorry, it's not our third, it's our second alpha. We're planning for the third, and so I have 3 in my mind. So we have components that are actually going to be released with this alpha versus that first foundational alpha. So we're continuing to, the milestones are still up there with, dates, and so that hasn't really changed. But we are looking to see, more realistically when that first beta will be out, but no really change as of now.
Okay. I have a question about the modals with the grayed out background. Why the blurred background? I guess the question is there ever a situation where you'd want to look at the modal and what was on your screen so that you can reference what was on your screen in the modal? Is that like not a thing that is good design? I don't know.
Generally, we can't guarantee the size of the modal. And also when we put the overlay, at least in the current one, and generally as far as design practices go, you make it dark enough to where the white has enough contrast. And also when you add that overlay, it makes it dark enough to where there isn't enough contrast between the background and the text to be able to tell what it says. So just by nature, we were trying to figure out how dark to make it. And we were like, we have to make it dark enough where it makes us pop out, but also it makes it so you can't read the text. So we did talk about that. But there's not really like a situation where you're going to be able to read both. And then for us to allow there to be enough contrast where you can read the text and see the modal without a ton of stuff around. But there is the option, like in the notification drawer, where we have it is a panel on the right where you can see the content and then just have that overlay panel be to the right. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Cool. So the blur allowed it so we could focus on the content even more.
I just had a question. Why aren't we just doing like a gray, like an opaque, 75% black overlay rather than like doing like the blur? Just because I know that like blur can like crank up some CPU usage and it's just like extra work. Just curious.
That's fair. We have a story for exploring how the blur works specifically in the next sprint. So all of that is on the table.
Yeah, I can add that GitHub issue in there so that those comments can be added to that.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, so there's the issue. So definitely feel free to add comments there. So we've not done the implementation of this, and we typically have a visual design and CSS conversation prior to implementation. So that can certainly be taken into consideration during that conversation. All right, any other questions or comments? I see there's another comment about the blur and concern about performance on that from Christian. Any other questions or comments?
No, this is great. The other thing, Leslie, it'd be nice if there's questions like this that we could consider or even bring up, because we may have a little bit of time at these meetings to talk about implementation and community concerns. It'd be great to get those even before the meeting. So I don't know if that's something, like I think we love hearing this feedback and figuring out how do we build this in and then get you guys involved even more in those conversations. So that's something saying, like, let's do more of that. And then if you guys can raise those topics even on the Slack channel, and we will throw them on the agenda for things that we're going to have as maybe more broad discussion points in those areas, that we could do that. So we could follow up with the blur conversation in our next meeting, definitely, like where we ended up with that. But if there's other things that you guys think of after this meeting, then, you know, let's make sure we get those as topics too.
Another super quick caveat, sorry, Leslie, super quick caveat is we have not gone through the whole process with any of these things. And usually we'll go, you create the design, we go to, development, and we work together and identify that kind of issue. And then we go back and edit the design based on that. We haven't done that yet. We show stuff as soon as we have it. So we haven't gone through that process yet. So any things you're seeing here are not like final designs that have been vetted. They're actually just were finished. Some of them were just finished yesterday. So we show them early, generally.
Yeah. And then hearing those thoughts about it is going to definitely help. And like you're saying, this is really early stages. So
yes, maybe to help with that conversation on capturing that, you had said put it in the Slack channel.
I don't know, where do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, maybe we add the GitHub issue links and so that it's tracked there. So I can send out the agenda earlier and then make those GitHub issue links available so that people know where they can comment. But yeah, I mean, I think that's good that we're sharing the visual designs early to hear this feedback. So.
Is there an option to start using PatternFly Next ahead of its actual release? Like if we wanted to start using parts of it now instead of using the old style?
We definitely have heard from some people that are comfortable using a beta. We probably owe some communication about, right now we have that beta slotted for the fall. And we probably need to look at that and just reevaluate where we're at and validate whether or not that's where we are at. So maybe we can look to do that at the next demo. So I've certainly heard from people that they are interested in taking the beta. With the alpha, a lot of things are just in flux. And so I'm not so sure that would be recommended.
Yeah, like the modifier names, like Andrés was saying, they're all about to change in the alpha, so that's going to be a pretty big hit to people, which is kind of.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, go ahead.
The reason I was asking about taking it early is because for OpenShift, we are trying to use PatternFly as we're redoing everything in React. And if we're going down that path, we don't want to do everything in current PatternFly and then in 6 months or whatever, redo everything again. That doesn't seem like a great use of our time. So we'd like to be able to piecemeal it if we can with the parts that are ready.
Yeah, any more aggressive dates on a beta, or, I mean, we'll consume an alpha. I know that probably causes you all more pain than it's worth, but we'll probably both of us more pain than it's worth. But we would love to not have to wait until the end of the summer or whenever the fall. As much as possible.
Okay.
I know that's challenging for everybody, I understand. But.
Let me add that to the next update that we cover the beta and, kind of what we're waiting on to solidify before coming out with a beta. And yeah, we can work on talking more about that. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Something coming in the chat. Okay. So if we didn't hear from you here and you do want to provide feedback, definitely look at the survey and feel free to pass along your feedback that way. Otherwise, you can reach out to us on Slack, or we'll see you at the next demo. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, see you guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.